Hi, and welcome to I Woke Up Like This. I am your host, Dr. Claudia Thompson, and today is the one where we talk about how we heal from anything. Now, I know it sounds strange, the entire idea that we could heal from anything, whether that be emotional, physical, a combination of both. As it turns out, we can heal from anything. You are more capable than you ever realized in doing the work of your own healing. A big part of this is your belief in the healing process and in your capability to complete the tasks you need to complete so that you can move through the healing process, born anew into a version of yourself that you've never really seen before. So today we're going to go over 5 steps that will help you integrate healing into your life. Things that are completely free, things that you have access to at all times, things that you have the ability to move through on your own or supported. This is a process that I've had to walk through myself for a multitude of things, emotional things, traumatic things, physical and emotionally intertwined things. Things that I thought I was never going to be able to heal from. Things that I thought were going to be with me my entire life. Things that I thought I would have to explain to people as to why I am the way that I am. Because for a long time, the scars felt obvious and they felt very public that everyone could see. But as it turns out, you can move through these things and scars fade. Lessons are learned, integrated, and logged into a place of your soul that makes you stronger and more powerful than you ever believed you could be. So let's get into it. The first step is awareness. Awareness that there is something to heal in the first place. The reason this is so difficult for us to take as an initial first step is because a lot of these things mask themselves as part of our personality. We're told this is just simply who we are, that all of these things are an integral part of our existence, how we were brought up, how we are meant to exist, and the boundaries that are set in place of our own capabilities. And in order for us to change something, in order for us to heal something, we have to be aware of it. We have to see it. We have to know that it's there. And it can take a long time to even realize that this is the case. I experienced this myself with multiple issues in my life that needed to be healed. Things that I couldn't see until I could actually see them. Some things took me decades to see. So if you're in that position right now, if you feel like you have spent the vast majority of your life existing with wounding, know that it doesn't have to stay. For me, the first step in doing this was looking at my relationship with food and my body. So for a long time, many, many decades, I struggled with food in my body, and I struggled with feeling a lot of guilt and shame for everything that I ate. There were times that I struggled with every variant of an eating disorder, from binging and purging to extreme restriction to over exercising to the idea that some perfect diet could be created and that if I lived within those bounds, then I would be perfect as well. That was a struggle that infiltrated decades of my life. A struggle, though, that without awareness, it's really hard to see. I grew up thinking that I was always going to struggle with food, that I was always going to have a problem with my body. And I didn't see how it was the narrative of that was the actual problem. The problem wasn't me. So I had to develop an awareness around the programming, around food in my body, around the narrative that certain things will make you larger, or certain things will make you smaller, or you are good or bad depending on whether or not you eat those things, or in what amount, or how much you exercise, or the type of exercise that you do. I had to become aware of the narrative that ran in my head every day. The things that I said to myself day in and day out were horrible. I would never speak to anyone else the way that I had spoke to myself for all of those years. And for most of those years, I wasn't even aware I was doing it. I thought that is just the way that I existed. The I'm not enough, I'm not good enough, I'm not pretty enough, I'm not thin enough, I'm not smart enough, I'm not enough. That narrative ran for a really long time until I became aware of it, until I understood that that was not me, that that was something that could change. I had to draw my attention towards it. And I had to acknowledge that it was there and that I didn't want it there any longer. So, whatever it is you might be struggling with, whether it's a physical ailment, an emotional struggle with a physical repercussion, because that happens more often than not. Things like autoimmune disease, migraines, digestive issues, disorders that originate around the nervous system in any way. So things like fibromyalgia, arthritis. There's so many that it's hard to list them all, because we have to draw awareness to these things, that we have autonomy around these things. And a lot of times that can be really hard to accept. It can be really hard to accept that you have autonomy over something that has debilitated you for a very long time. I also used to suffer from migraines, so I understand the physical complexity of pain. I understand how terrifying that can be, how debilitating it can be. But I want you to know, drawing an awareness to it, seeing it as something that is healable, something that is fixable, allows you to move on to the next phase of this healing process. The next step is having the courage to see these things and to feel them. To ask yourself why these things are happening. To ask yourself where the patterns come from. To ask yourself how you participate in the thing that needs to be healed. Because while many of these things are not your fault that they happen to you, I want to be clear about that. Traumatic experiences are not our fault, but they are our responsibility to heal. And spiritually speaking, a lot of us come here to transmute the density. If you don't know what transmutation is changing one thing into something else. So you're transmuting the density or the darkness of a situation into light. The trials and tribulations that you face, the difficulties that put themselves in front of your life, into your life, as part of your experience, are there for a reason. They're there to help you grow your soul, but they're also here for you to transform them into something else, because you have the power and ability to do that. So being able to look at something for what it is part of this process of healing. You have to be able to feel it. You have to be able to feel why it hurts you. You have to be able to feel through the emotions so that you can get through the healing process. Emotions and feelings are nothing more than energy. Energy in movement. So when we feel things like pain, when we feel things like anger, frustration, sadness, depression, anxiety, this is an energetic frequency that is moving around. Seeing it for what it is, giving an awareness to it and understanding that, allowing yourself to feel it so that it moves through you will allow you to process that energy from a stored place to a place where it's moved on. So being able to see the things, being able to acknowledge them is a very important part of the process. It's very hard to look at these things. It's very hard to feel these things. It's very hard to feel the feeling of abandonment, of abuse, of mistreatment. It's hard to feel like no one understands you. No one understands your pain. It's hard to look at that. It's hard to acknowledge that. But when you're able to look at it, you're able to see it for what it is. Something you are meant to move through, not stay in. The next step of this is acceptance. Accepting things for the way that they were. Once you've seen them, once you've drawn an awareness to them, and you're able to accept that that is the path that you were on, you can change things from there. But you have to accept it first. You can't play the victim. You can't play the blame game of your experience. The healing process is one where you acknowledge the autonomy of your life and of your ability to move through it. It's not a right or wrong. Your experiences can be labeled as right or wrong on the surface, but underneath it's a very complex web of teaching you lessons, of expanding soul, of transmuting energy and rebalancing energy. Because energy cannot be created nor destroyed. So if you have a situation where there's a lot of density that's been created, a lot of dark, dingy, sticky stuff, pain, anger, resentment, jealousy, all of the lower vibrational emotional feelings. Part of your mission here as someone who stands with the light, and I would argue anyone listening to this podcast aligns with those forces. Part of your job is to come here and take on that density, to take on that darkness and change it into something else. And you can't do that unless you touch it. You can't do that unless you're in it. It's not a spectator sport. It's one where you are in the trenches, doing the work. So a lot of times we have a tendency to lean towards the idea that we're being punished for something, that we've done wrong in a past life, or we're working through karma and things like that. I don't necessarily align with those beliefs because I know the people who have been dealt the most difficult of lives are some of the strongest souls available in the ether of existence. Because taking on that kind of density and turning it into something less dense is a very difficult task. It's a job for a warrior. And so if you feel like you've been piled on, you're doing really important work by working through it. We need you. We need you to work on your healing. We need you to acknowledge the more dense feelings that you have. We need you to locate the source of them. And we need you to transmute them. Because the next step that we have to work on when we're healing is having an openness for unconditional love. And unconditional love is exactly that, unconditional. It doesn't matter how awful a situation is, how awful a person is to you. You send them love. That does not mean that you accept mistreatment. That does not mean that you drop boundaries. And in fact, I would argue most of you listening need to draw boundaries, healthy boundaries that set the parameters for how you are treated in this world. That's part of this. And it happens in many stages, in many layers of creating boundaries and shifting them and moving them and aligning them with your true internal integrity of how you want to be treated. So unconditional love is not unconditional access, to be clear. Unconditional love is saying, I see your capacity. I see why you are the way you are at the level that I'm currently at and can objectively reason why you're like that. And I say, I love you. I have these boundaries and I don't accept you into my places and spaces any longer if that's necessary, or here are the limitations. But I love you. I want nothing more than for you to heal from the things that you've been through, regardless of whether or not that benefits me on a one-on-one basis at all. There's that, send love and light saying, and it's true. You can't change the world. You can't transmute density by making it more dense, by adding anger, revenge, those kinds of things. They just simply, they don't work because you're a vibrational match for what you put out. So if you insist on revenge or you insist on any sort of anything that's negative, you will get that back. And you say, I accept you. I accept you for you. I accept you for your capacity. I understand that you are on your own path and that the role that you are playing in my life is one of an antagonist, one that has taught me how to make appropriate boundaries, one that has shown me how to forgive and how to love in situations that are downright awful. That in and of itself is a gift. Duality is really important. Having duality and balance is really important. But you need resistance in order to grow. So seeing it for what it is, accepting it for what it is, an opportunity for growth, an opportunity to add more love, an opportunity to dig out a limiting belief, an opportunity to heal some generational trauma, an opportunity to end a cycle with you. Accept it and love it. As we heal, we move into unknown place and spaces. These unknown place and spaces are new to us. They're new to us emotionally. They're new to our nervous system. They are new physically. When you're used to chaos, calm is difficult, not just for you mentally, but also for your body physically. Your body will have programmed fight or flight responses. It will have a trained response to your reality. And so when your reality shifts, there is a catch-up period for your body that has to occur. So you have to have faith in the unknown. You have to have faith in what you are not used to. When we heal in a place that is unfamiliar because the familiar is what hurt us. The familiar is what we are healing from. Whether it be patterns, people, places, spaces, it doesn't matter. Anything that you knew is integrated into the things that you're healing from. And so some of those things will have to be let go of. You'll have to move away from it. It's like that saying, you can't heal in the place that hurt you. It's like an alcoholic, you know? Most alcoholics spend a lot of time in bars, and they're not going to be able to heal in that place. That's the most obvious example, obviously. But if you are healing from an addiction like that, staying out of those places will allow you to heal. But there's this component where that's where you're used to going. You don't know where else to go. That finding somewhere else to go is unknown to you at the time. So you have to have faith, you have to have courage that the place that you don't know about yet is better than the one that you're currently in. This was one of the biggest components for me on my journey at multiple points in my healing journey, because there were a lot of things that I had to heal from. It's like an onion. I had to pull back a layer at a time. And I didn't even know the other layer was under there until I exposed it. The first one was healing my relationship with food in my body. The second was a very abusive relationship that I was in for over a decade. I couldn't even see how harmful that was until I healed that one piece of the relationship with food in my body, because I was crapping on myself so much that I couldn't see how much somebody else was adding to that at the time. So your healing is going to happen in layers. Your only job is to focus in on the one that's directly in front of you. Do that, and you will continue to move forward, even if it feels like you're moving forward a little bit and back a little bit and up and down and sideways and all the things. You are moving forward. Just focus on the one thing you have in front of you right now. And so that faith in my journey, the first part of it, healing that relationship with food in my body, I was terrified to stop dieting, to stop counting calories, to stop over exercising, to put all of that down, because I felt at the time, and it sounds so silly to me now because I'm so far from it, but at the time I really felt that if I stopped doing that, that I would become the most grotesque version of myself and be completely unacceptable to the world around me. And I had to push through that fear with the faith that this thing that I hadn't tried yet, the unknown, was going to be exactly what I needed. I had tried everything else. This was the only option. The one thing I didn't know what was going to happen. The next place this became impeccably important for me was when I left my ex-husband. I didn't know what was going to happen there. I didn't know what was going to happen to me. I didn't know what was going to happen to my life, because I had spent 13 years in that place and space. That was all I knew at that juncture. That was my entire adult life. And I had not spent any of this time away from this individual. And I had to take a massive leap of faith in doing that, going into that place where I didn't know what was going to happen. And developing your faith is done in these moments where you have to move towards the unknown, where you have to move towards this unknown place and space, where you have to move away from people, places, and things that are no longer serving you. Without it, you won't go through it. You have to have faith in the things you can't see, that you can't touch, that aren't directly in front of you right now. Develop it. You won't regret it. So when we heal from anything, we have to see it first. We have to acknowledge it. Then we have to feel it. We have to accept it. We have to unconditionally love it for what it did for us. We have to have faith in the unknown places and spaces that we're going. Because the healed version of you is the version that you have not met yet. You can make it to the place where the most difficult aspects of your life are behind you. You can make it to the place where you are living in joy, in happiness, in contentment for your current reality. You can live in a place where you're moving towards your goals, where you're moving through the little bit of fear that pops up, where the people around you are no longer resisting who you are. You can move to that place and space where you can be authentically you, the version of you that you always knew you could be. So move through whatever you're healing from, because you really can heal anything. You've got this. Keep going.